Prince Harry has issued a rare and deeply reflective public message, acknowledging that he is acutely aware of his own past mistakes while addressing what he describes as a deeply troubling rise in anti-Semitism across the United Kingdom. The Duke of Sussex made his comments in a newly published article for The New Statesman, where he focused on the growing concerns surrounding attacks on Jewish communities and the wider climate of tension in Britain. His remarks come at a time when authorities have raised the national terror threat level to severe, following a series of violent incidents that have shocked communities in both London and Manchester. The increase in hostility has intensified public debate about safety, identity, and the boundaries between political protest and prejudice. In his writing, Prince Harry directly referred to recent attacks targeting Jewish people and expressed concern about how quickly fear is spreading through communities that have long considered Britain their home. He emphasized that this kind of hatred, directed at individuals simply because of their faith or identity, should not be mistaken for political expression. Instead, he described it as something far more dangerous that demands collective responsibility and awareness. What stands out most in his message is the way he connects current events to a broader moral warning. Harry argues that when anger and misinformation become intertwined, the result is confusion that can fuel further division. He stresses that the country is at a point where clarity of language and intent matters more than ever, especially when public emotions are running high over global conflicts. He also addressed the ongoing tensions linked to the situation in the Middle East, noting that while there is understandable concern and widespread protest regarding the scale of human suffering in Gaza and Lebanon, it is essential to ensure that such protests do not spill over into hostility toward Jewish communities in the UK. In his view, the line between criticism of governments and discrimination against entire groups of people must remain clearly defined. One of the most striking parts of his message comes when he references his own past. Without dwelling on it, Prince Harry acknowledges that he is not speaking from a position of moral perfection. He recalls earlier mistakes in his life, including the widely reported incident in 2005 when he wore a Nazi uniform at a fancy dress event. The image of that moment became one of the most controversial episodes of his younger years and has followed his public image ever since. In his reflection, he describes those actions as thoughtless and says he has taken responsibility for them, learned from them, and carried those lessons forward. The reason he brings it up now, he explains, is to underline how personal experience can shape understanding of harm, responsibility, and the importance of speaking carefully in moments of social tension. Rather than treating that past as a separate chapter, he connects it directly to his current message. He suggests that mistakes, when properly acknowledged and understood, can become a foundation for growth. In his view, that growth creates a responsibility to speak out when similar patterns of misunderstanding or prejudice begin to reappear in society. Harry's central argument in the article is that cycles of harm are only extended when they are met with more harm. He warns that reacting to injustice with further hostility does not resolve conflict, but instead deepens it. Breaking that cycle, he argues, requires restraint, clarity, and a willingness to separate legitimate criticism from collective blame. At the same time, he does not dismiss the seriousness of global political concerns. He acknowledges that there is deep and justified alarm about the scale of destruction and loss of life in conflict zones in the Middle East, and he recognizes that many people are protesting in response to those realities. However, he stresses that the existence of legitimate protest does not excuse or even unintentionally justify hostility directed at Jewish communities at home. In his words, criticism of governments and awareness of international humanitarian issues must remain distinct from prejudice against a people or a religion. That distinction, he suggests, is what is currently being blurred in dangerous ways. The timing of his comments is significant. With rising tensions in public spaces, increased security concerns, and heightened sensitivity around demonstrations and counter-demonstrations, his intervention adds another high-profile voice to a conversation already under intense scrutiny in the UK. The fact that the terror threat level has been raised adds further weight to the urgency of the issue. Harry's decision to speak publicly through a long-form article rather than a formal statement also gives his message a more reflective tone. It is not framed as a political intervention in the traditional sense, but more as a personal appeal grounded in experience and concern. He repeatedly returns to the idea of responsibility, both individual and collective, in shaping how societies respond to fear and division. He emphasizes that words matter, matter, especially in moments of heightened emotion. According to his message, careless language or unclear messaging can easily contribute to misunderstanding, even when the original intent is not harmful. That is why he argues for precision when discussing sensitive topics, particularly those involving identity, religion, and ongoing international conflict. What makes this message stand out in the broader context of royal and public commentary is the personal layer he adds. By acknowledging his own history, he positions his argument not as detached observation, but as something shaped by lived consequence. That choice appears intended to reinforce the idea that accountability is not just about the present moment, but also about how past actions inform present responsibility. He also highlights the importance of refusing to normalize cycles of hostility. In his view, once societies begin to accept prejudice as a reaction to political anger, it becomes much harder to draw boundaries that protect vulnerable communities. The emphasis throughout his message is on prevention rather than reaction, urging early recognition of harmful patterns before they escalate further. While he does not directly name specific governments or political leaders, his language is clearly aimed at broader societal behavior rather than individual actors. The focus remains on public discourse, community safety, and the responsibility of those expressing opinions in volatile times. As this message circulates, it adds to ongoing discussions about how public figures engage with sensitive geopolitical issues and domestic social tensions. Prince Harry's comments are likely to be interpreted in different ways depending on political perspective, but at the core of his message is a call for restraint, clarity, and empathy. In a period where public debate is often fast-moving and emotionally charged, his appeal centers on slowing down the language of division before it turns into something more harmful. Whether or not audiences agree with every aspect of his framing, the underlying concern he raises is difficult to ignore. The rise in anti-Semitism he refers to, the increasing security concerns in the UK, and the broader backdrop of international conflict all intersect in a way that makes the conversation particularly sensitive. His message attempts to navigate that complexity by reinforcing one consistent point: criticism and protest must never come at the cost of dehumanizing entire communities. As public reaction continues to build around his comments, the discussion is likely to extend beyond the article itself, feeding into wider debates about responsibility, speech, and the role of high-profile figures in moments of national tension.
One day, a student